And now, ladies and gentlemen, direct from the main room of the Stardust, Mr. Gene Tracy.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Stardust, one of the nation's most famous night spots. Incidentally, I'm a replacement act here tonight. I guess you know that. Zsa Zsa Gabor was supposed to be here, but she came down with a chest cold. Bless her heart. Those Hollywood germs really know how to live, don't they? Can tell that. But I'm very fortunate, really, that I made it at all. See, I've been plagued by bad luck all my life. Of course, even from the very beginning of my life, being born and raised in Anadarko, Oklahoma, now that's bad luck in anybody's book, I can tell you that. Anadarko was so small that it was only open 3 days a week. Anadarko, that's the truth. Our phone book only had one yellow page. Anadarko was so small that the Masons and Knights of Columbus knew one another's secret. We had an all-night diner, used to close at 2:30 in the afternoon. It's the truth. For 27 years, Howard Johnson's special flavor of the month was vanilla. So small. But I come from a long line of losers. I've had bad luck, but I come from a long line of... My grandfather, for an example, paid $1,000 for a burial plot and 2 weeks later drowned at sea. That's bad news. That's right, I had an uncle who was cruise director on the Titanic. I had an uncle left me a restaurant in New York I went to investigate. Found out it was right in the middle of Harlem called Whitey's Bar and Grill. Bad news. But they're still having bad luck in Anadarko. I just got a letter from my mother. Said our Uncle Agusta passed on. Agusta was our family favorite uncle. He was always bringing us kids candy and gum and snuff and things that Oklahoma children enjoy. Of course, he was our family famous uncle, too. Augusta had the longest white beard in Caddo County with a permanent wave in it that he developed one Saturday afternoon. He was out on the back porch washing out his beard. He reached around for a towel and stuck his finger in a light socket. Curled his beard up. At the same time, his hearing aid backfired, blew out his shirt pocket, and he was getting government time signals from the gold filling in his tooth for about 8 months after that happened. Every time he'd kiss my Aunt May, it'd blow a light somewhere in the house. Got horny one night, blew every TV set in the block. He died. He passed on. He died from this water on the brain condition he developed. When he was just a kid, he always wanted to be a pilot, wanted to fly. And he got out one Sunday afternoon and scotch taped 127 pigeons to his arms and got, what they call that, airborne. Got airborne. And one of them smart aleck boys threw a box of Hart's Mountain bird seed down in the stone quarry, mashed his head up. They had to operate. They drilled a hole in the back of his head and slipped in a little release valve and hung a silver chain on it so he could reach back about every 30, 45 minutes and pull that chain and release the pressure from the water on the brain condition he developed. And here last Sunday week, he was coming home from work. There at the Dobbville Home for Wayward and Delinquent Girls, there in Godibo, Oklahoma. Started down Sugar Creek Hill, got that chain caught in his bicycle clip and flushed himself to death before he could hit the bottom. Terrible thing. But Anadarko was a small town. We only had one barber shop, Jess Witten's barber shop. He was the only barber in the and Jess was the kind of a guy that would take a drink on special occasions. Like if the sun come up, or if it went down, that was a dandy. He always took it. I'll never forget, I saw Jess the first day that put parking meters in Anadarko. Jess walked up and put a nickel in, turned the handle, stepped back and said, my God, I've lost 100 pounds. Poor old Jess, he would drink. But my first haircut I ever got, I got from Jess Witten's barbershop. He put a part in my hair from ear to ear. Until I was 14 years old, people kept coming up whispering in my nose. That's hard for a kid to grow up with. But things are still going not good at all in Anadarko. My mother in her letter said that our bathroom had caught on fire. Said not to worry about it none. They got it put out before it reached the house. We were all thankful about that. But I'll never forget, I tried to get away from the bad luck that had been plaguing me all my life. I moved to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I got off the Greyhound bus, walked out in front of the bus station, set my bags down. I said, well, here I am, big town, ready to take over and make my place in the world and throw off these shackles of bad luck that's been... Looked down, somebody had stole my bags while I was standing there talking. Never forget one night I was out at a party trying to show off how sophisticated I was. I was drinking champagne out of a girl's slipper and like to choke to death on a loose corn pad. Nothing went right for me. Nothing went right. I got so drunk that night I left a sex orgy to go watch Lawrence Welk MC the grand opening of an Orange Julius stand. That's drunk. I went into the hijack business there in Tulsa, walked up to one fella, I said, stick him down. He said, you mean stick him up? I said, no wonder I haven't been doing any good at this. Bad luck. Bad luck's the name of the game for me. Yesterday, I called Dial a Prayer, and they hung up on me. That's right, I'm the only kid I know got beat up at a love-in. I pledged to fraternity when I was in high school, and part of the initiation, you had to jump a 3-foot candle, but I slipped and got blackballed. Everything went wrong. The only thing I ever did really of note, I had the longest accident in Oklahoma history. There at the J.C. Penney store, I fell down the up escalator for 27 minutes. That's right. They came to Anadarko. They came to Anadarko and put a plaque on the house where I was born. Said condemned by the county health department. There in Oklahoma City one time was on a radio program and won an electric car, free and clear, an electric car. No strings, no taxes to pay anything. Then I found out it cost $6,000 for an extension cord to get it home. In Los Angeles, I used to play the races quite a bit. I'll never forget, I'd always go, but I never got to go to the cashier's window because I never knew what horse to bet. I could never get any signs. Like some people get signs, they'll see a number on a boxcar, a number on a building, and they'll get a sign and know what to play, but I could never get a sign. Until one night, I remember it was the 5th night of the meet. And on that night, I dreamed 5 times, had 5 dreams, and each time I dreamed of a great big 5, and somehow or other my alarm clock went off at 5 o'clock in the morning, had it set for 10. But I went out to the track and got there just before the 5th race, and I walked up to the $5 winning, bet $500 on the number 5 horse, and sure enough, he came in 5th. So, bad luck. Let me tell you, in junior high school, the only girl I could get a date with was from over at Witten, Oklahoma. Her name was Bumadine Schlevidge. Man, she was ugly. She had to be the ugliest broad God ever strung a gut through. You should have seen her. She had big round circles all over where guys been touching her with 10-foot poles. But of course, you couldn't blame her for being ugly because all them girls from Verdon was ugly. Every last one of them. As a matter of fact, they held a beauty contest in Verdon one time and nobody won. They were all ugly, but Bumadine even stood out among them. My God, she'd go to the psychiatrist. He'd make her lay face down on the couch. That's right. They got a peeping Tom over at her house trying to pull down the shades one night. She was at it. I'll never forget, we were going to school one time. Every time we'd go to school, they'd make her use the cattle crossings. Her daddy took her to a dog show over in Chickasha one time. Damn, she didn't win 4 blue ribbons before he could get her out of the building. Ugly girl. Ugly. If Moses had seen her, there'd been 11 commandments, I can tell you that. I'll never forget, she was a little girl. We had a 4th of July picnic there at Ranelette Park in Anadarko. Bumadine was walking. She'd got lost. She was just a little thing. And the policeman was holding on to her hand, and she said, "Do you think we'll ever find my mama and daddy?" He said, "I don't know, honey. There's lots of places for them to hide." She finally got a job. Bumadine got a job at a doctor's office there in Anadarko. Now, she wasn't a nurse, but what she'd do is sit out in the reception hall, make everybody sick, and run their bill up. I'll never forget, I went to visit her one time in a hospital, and she treated one fella for yellow jaundice for 18 months before she found out he's Chinese. Ugly girl. Ugly girl. I went to visit her one time in a hospital. You know how dark they keep the hospital rooms? And I happened to peek in this one room, and it looked like the body of a man laying there with a great big frog growing out the top of his head. And I looked in, I said, "My God, how'd this happen?" The frog said, "I don't know. It started with a wart on my ass." Ugly girl. I'll never forget when she was a little girl, she had a little white duck. She had a little white duck that she wanted to enter in our county fair, and she was on her way out to the fairground and had the duck under her arms, and she stopped there at the Bluebird Cafe to get a Coca-Cola, and the waiter walked up and said, "Pardon me," said, "Where are you going with that pig?" She said, "This ain't no pig, it's a duck." He said, "Shut up, I'm talking to the duck." He was ugly girl. Not only ugly, she was stupid. Bumadine was so dumb she thought a sanitary belt was a shot of wild turkey out of a clean glass. Now that's dumb. Ugly girl. And her mother, and dirty. She was a dirty girl. And I can't understand that because her mother, Miss Schlevidge, was probably the most meticulous housekeeper I've ever seen. Her mother was what you'd call careful. Her mother used to spread newspapers under the cuckoo clock. Now that's careful. But Bumadine was so dirty, they kicked her out of the hippie organization. They wouldn't even let her be a hippie. You heard the definition of a hippie? That's a guy that thinks he's Tarzan, looks like Jane, and smells like cheetah. Speaking of hippies, we heard the other day, you know why hippies sniff glue? They're trying to paste up their nose so they can't smell one another. You heard about the two hippies that took LSD and prune juice? What a trip they took. But times have changed. Times have changed. I don't go with those ugly girls anymore. You know, times have really changed. Have you really paid any attention to the dramatic times that we're living in? Women's lib is a good example. Women's lib. They're wanting to do away with deodorants, wanting to do away with cosmetics, wanting free access to abortion. Somehow you get the idea if they get the first two, they won't have to worry a hell of a lot about that third one, I'll tell you that. But times are changing. Did you realize that a recent national survey proves that there's more writing on the walls in women's restrooms than in men's restrooms? But hell, it stands to reason they got both hands free. And we're living in times of dramatic change. If you really watch it, have you paid any attention? Cotton's moving west. Cattle's coming east. A lot of our good southern folk moving up north. Certainly you can tell we're being infiltrated by the Yankees coming down south. That's right, Jewish people are starting to eat pork. Catholics starting to practice birth control. It's getting so bad in North Carolina that the Baptists have started to speak to one another in the liquor stores. Dramatic changes. Dramatic changes. Advances in medical science. I heard on the radio coming over here about the two Polak surgeons who've just performed the first successful hemorrhoid transplant. Dramatic changes every place you look. And I I think a lot of the changes can be attributed to the boob tube, to the television set. And I'm not talking about television programming necessarily, but the idiotic commercials you see on television today. Have you really paid any attention? One of them, thank God, just went off the air the first of the year. I'm sure you all remember it. You remember the guy riding on the horse, surrounded by 10,000 head of cattle, and he's asking you to come to where the flavor is. Now, does that make sense? That makes sense. And you've heard of the Hertz commercial. You remember the Hertz commercial where the guy comes sailing down out of the sky, lands in the convertible, and there he goes down I-85. If he ever came down just a little bit off center and landed in one of those cars got a stick shift, he'd find out why they call it Hertz. And I don't know, what your habits are, but I can tell you for sure, for me, if I'm going to double my pleasure and I'm going to double my fun, I sure as hell ain't going to do it with juicy fruit. And what other commercial? Those you see by the Jolly Green Giant. Now, there's a product I wouldn't use. Those commercials, those vegetables purveyed by the Jolly Green Giant, because I'll be very frank with you, the way that guy stands over that garden, now, by God, that makes me nervous. And certainly television's having its effect on the youth of our community. You can tell just by watching. We heard about the two little boys the other day. Their mother went to the psychiatrist and said, "What can I do? My little boys are using such terrible language." He said, "Well, how often do you spank them?" She said, "Well, I wouldn't whip one of them for anything." He said, "Well, there's the problem. You've got to learn to spank those boys when they need it." So the mother comes down the next morning to breakfast. Asked the first little boy, said, "Honey, what do you want for breakfast?" Said, "Give me some damn post toasties." She whacked him, knocked him clear out on the floor. His little brother's looking. She said, "Honey, what do you want for breakfast?" He looked at his little brother. He said, "Well, Mama," he said, "I ain't just plumb made up my mind, but you can bet your sweet ass there ain't gonna be none of them damn post toasties. I'll tell you that for sure." Times are really changing, you can certainly tell. And certainly television's having its effect on the fashions we see today. We heard the other day about the old country boy who was on a bus, and the girl sitting right across from him had on a mini skirt. And he was sitting there just a staring and a grinning. He was just a grinning and a staring. Finally, she noticed him, pulled her skirt down as far as she could. She said, "Well, I can certainly tell you're no gentleman." He said, "Yes, ma'am. And I can tell you ain't there a gentleman neither." We heard about the boy that Bear Bryant, the coach down in Alabama, was interviewing the young men, trying to find out if there was any prospective football timber in the high school graduates just coming into college, and all day long he'd been doing this. This one kid must have been 6'8" tall. Came into the room. My God, he had to weigh 285 pounds of solid rock. And the coach said, "My God, look at you." And the kid said, "Yeah, here I am." And the coach said, "Let me ask you something, son. Did you play any high school football?" He said, "Oh, yes, sir. I was voted the most valuable high school player in the state last year." He said, "Well, I can understand that. You must make a whale of a tackle." He said, "No, sir, I don't play tackle." Said, "I'm in the backfield. I play halfback." Bear Bryant said, "Well, certainly you couldn't play halfback. A boy as big as you are, you're not that fast or that agile." He said, "Yes, sir, I am." Said, "As a matter of fact, I won the all-state in the 440 high hurdles and was captain of our basketball team, averaged 43 points a game." The coach said, "My God, you are an athlete." He said, "I guess your grades are pretty bad." He said, "No, sir, I'm a straight A student in high school, and I was valedictorian at the commencement exercises." Coach said, "My God." He said, "Tell me a little something about your private life. I guess you drink a little bit." He said, "No, sir. I was voted the most outstanding young Sunday school teacher by the Baptist Convention in Montgomery, Alabama." Coach said, "My land, son, all I can say is welcome to Alabama." Said, "Tell me, son, don't you have any vices at all?" Kid said, "Well, Yes, sir. I do have a tendency to lie a little bit every now and again. Heard about the older couple sitting out on the porch, and she nudged her husband and said, honey, what's happened to our sex relations? He said, damn if I know, we don't even get a Christmas card from them anymore. Heard about the blonde-headed fellow went to the doctor. He said, you've got to explain it to me. I'm blonde-headed, my wife's blonde-headed, and here we have this little red-haired boy. Explain that to me. The doctor said, well, let's get to the bottom of this. How often do you have sex relations? The guy said, oh, I don't know, maybe once, twice a year. Doctor said, hell, that's it, rust. Heard about the policeman that was out making his rounds out in the lover's lane. He walked up to one car and threw the flashlight in the back seat, and this couple were in there making love. He said, what are y'all doing in there? She said, we're doing the twist. He said, oh. Walked to the next car, flashed the light in the back seat, and there's another couple making love. Said, what are you doing in there? She said, we're doing the boogaloo. He said, oh. Walked to the third car, flashed his light in the back seat, and another couple making love. He said, what are you doing, the bossa nova? She said, no, I'm doing the boss a favor. Heard about the Pollock prostitute that couldn't spell too good and kept winding up at the warehouse. Guy walked in the bar, and the first thing he sees is this big wheel of fortune behind the bar. And all the seats have numbers on them. And he sat down by the guy and said, what in the devil's this? He said, well, this bartender used to be in the carnival business. And when he bought this bar owner, when he bought this bar, he set that wheel back there. And every hour he used to spin the wheel, and whoever sitting on the lucky seat got a free drink. The guy said, why, that's a marvelous idea. Said, I bet it increased his business. Said, no, it didn't do too good till they put that sporting house upstairs. And now twice a day he spins the wheel, and whoever's sitting on the lucky seat gets to go upstairs for a freebie. He said, boy, that sounds wonderful. Said, did you ever win anything? He said, well, no, not me personally, but my wife's the luckiest son of a gun you ever saw in your life. Bartender reading the newspaper in the middle of the afternoon, reading about the football tackle. The biggest man, the largest man in professional football has just gotten married, and he's having his honeymoon, stated in the paper, at the Holiday Inn Motel in room 271. And about the middle of the afternoon, here comes this drunk. Comes in and orders a glass of beer, and he asks the bartender, said, hey, bartender, where's the cat house? The bartender said, hey, screw, said, get out of here, take a walk. Said, I don't know from no cat house. He said, no, I'm serious. Where's the cat house? He said, hey, said, get out of here. I told you once I don't know about no cat. He said, but you don't understand. I'm really serious. Where's the cat house? Bartender said, I'll tell you what you do. You go down to the Holiday Inn, and you knock on room 271. So the drunk staggers out to the Holiday Inn, goes up to room 271, knocks on the door, and this gorgeous young thing opens the door in her negligee. The drunk reaches around and grabs her by the cheeks. At about that time, this tackle comes unwinding out of the bathroom, slaps this drunk down the metal steps, goes down and picks him up, drop kicks him halfway across the parking lot, picked him up, said, now, just before I bust you wide open, you got anything to say? Drunk said, yes, sir. I would like to make one observation. You sure got a lot to learn about running a whorehouse, I'll tell you that. He'd been drinking. He'd been drinking. Been drinking that vodka, that wild vodka. You know what they call vodka and orange juice? Of course, that's a screwdriver. You know what they call vodka and milk and magnesia? That's a Phillips screwdriver. You know what they call vodka and preparation H? That's a pile driver. Yeah, about the guy that comes into the bar and he comes shouldering his way up to the bar. He's looking for a fight. And he looks to the right and he said, everybody on my left's a no good dirty bastard. Nobody said anything. He said, everybody on my left's a damn queer. Finally, he hears these little footsteps running behind him. He said, where are you going, boy? He said, excuse me, sir, I'm on the wrong side. Yeah. That's why I asked the guy. I said, pardon me, but do you have a fairy godmother? He said, no, but we've got an uncle we weren't just sure of. You know, I had a brother move down to Texas, and I went down to visit him. I was staying in the Holiday Inn, and there was a guy came in, evidently an Easterner, and came in, and the waitress came up and said, could I take your order? He said, yes, ma'am, I want a short beer. So she went out, came back with a fish bowl full of beer. He said, I wanted a short beer. She said, well, everything in Texas is big. Said, in Texas, that there's a short beer. So then he ordered a petite filet steak. She brought a great big platter and meat hanging over all four sides of it. He said, I just wanted a petite filet. She said, well, in Texas, that's a petite filet. He said, everything in Texas is big. He had been working on his beer for about 30 minutes. By that time, his beer was working on him. He asked the waitress, said, where's the restroom? She said, you go all the way down to the end of the hall and turn to the door on the left. But he'd had enough to drink. He went all the way to the end of the hall and turned to the door on the right. Fell in the swimming pool. And you could hear it every time he'd come to the top. He was hollering, don't flush it! Don't flush it! But I was down in Texas to visit my brother. He went into cattle ranch business. He knows about as much about cattle as I do, which is nothing. And he had a bull that had to be, he bought him one bull and 37 cows. And that bull had to be the second cousin to Ferdinand, because all it wanted to do was lay out under the trees and just smell the flowers. And my brother had the most disappointed bunch of cows you've ever seen. Till my brother went to the veterinarian and he said, what can I do about my bull? And he sold him a half a dozen of the biggest purple pills I've ever seen. And we got one of them pills down that bull, and you have never seen such a change in personality in anything in your life. Now, it was dramatic. And he not only took care of all my brother's cows, but he jumped the fence and serviced the neighbor's cows. And I've given that a lot of thought. And I don't know what was in those pills. I do know it tasted a lot like peppermint. I do know that. But they were so powerful. My brother 3 years later moved off that farm, and they were so powerful he was scared to leave them laying around, and he dumped them pills down in the cistern. And I went back there 2 years later, and that fella said they still hadn't been able to get that pump handle down. Powerful. Powerful. Back in the olden days, there was a story about the mean, bad-looking guy. Wore a black hat and had a big scar on his face. And he walked into this saloon, and the guy was playing the piano. And he looked at him, he said, hey, knock off that piano playing. And the guy didn't even look up, just kept playing the piano. An old bad actor whipped out his gun and went, pow! And blew off the left cuff link of the piano player. He still didn't look up. He was just playing that piano. And the guy said, I guess you didn't hear me. Pow! And he blew off the right cuff link of the piano player. And the piano player still didn't look up. And the bartender walked over to the guy wearing the black hat. He said, "Pardon me, fella." Said, "But could I do you a favor?" He said, "How in the world are you going to do me a favor?" He said, "Well, I want to tell you that right next door at the general store, they've got a sale on these 2-pound cans of lard. Now, what you want to do is go get you a 2-pound can of that lard while it's on sale, and you want to take that gun you're shooting at that piano player, and you stick that down in that lard just several times, and you get as much of that lard on that gun as you possibly can, because just as soon as Wyatt Earp gets through playing that song in memory of his mother, he's going to take that gun you've been shooting and he's going to stick it in your ear." You know what? Like the 27-year-old girl that married the 67-year-old man. They're married a month and he dies of a heart attack. They're out the graveyard burying him. She's crying and wailing and carrying on. And her friend said, "Why, you ought not carry on like that." Said, "You were only married a short while." Said, "But you don't understand. He was the greatest lover in the world." Said, "But there was so much difference in your age, and look at all the money he left." Said, "But you don't understand. He was the greatest lover in the world. He only made love once a week in rhythm to the church bells on Sunday morning. Bless his heart, he'd still be alive if it hadn't been for that damn fire truck came by with that clang, 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 clang." But just a little word of advice, if I may, and I'll leave. Don't worry about it, friends. Don't worry about a thing. Because really, you've only got 2 things to worry about. That's today and tomorrow. I had a friend told me his son had received a draft notice. And he told his son, said, "Son, don't worry about it." Said, "Because you've really only got 2 things to worry about. Either they're going to draft you or they're not going to draft you. Now, if they're not going to draft you, there's no sense in worrying about it anyway. If they're going to draft you, you've only got 2 things to worry about. Either going to put you in the Army or they're going to put you in the Navy. Now, if they put you in the Navy, you got nothing to worry about anyway. If they put you in the Army, you got 2 things to worry about. Either going to keep you here in this country or they're going to send you overseas. Now, if they keep you here in this country, you got nothing to worry about anyway. But if they send you overseas, you've only got 2 things to worry about. Either they're going to put you right up in the front lines or they're going to keep you in the back. Now, if they keep you in the back, you got nothing to worry about anyway. But if they put you up front, you only got 2 things to worry about. Either you're going to get shot or you're not going to get shot. Now, if you're not going to get shot, there's no sense in worrying about it anyway. If you're going to get shot, you've only got 2 things to worry about. Either you're going to live or you're going to die. Now, if you're going to live, there's no sense in worrying about it anyway. But if you're going to die, you've only got 2 things to worry about. Either you're going to heaven or you're going to hell. Now, if you go into heaven, you got nothing to worry about anyway. But if you go to hell, they're going to dig you up and make paper out of you anyway. Then you only got 2 things to worry about. Either they're going to make you into toilet paper or they're going to make you into newspaper. Now, if they make you into newspaper, you got nothing to worry about anyway. But if they make you into toilet paper, you only got 2 things to worry about. Either they're going to put you in the men's restroom or they're going to put you in the ladies' restroom. Now, if they put you in the men's restroom, you only got 1 thing to worry about. But if they put you in the ladies' restroom, you only got 2 things to worry about. Thank you very, very much, ladies and gentlemen. And good night.